All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last day of programming at the CNN Politico Grill here at the DNC. Thank you so much for being with us, and for those of you who've been with us throughout the week. I'm really thrilled today to be here with our partner, Bayer, who is making this conversation today possible. Joining me is Jess Christiansen. Jess is Senior Vice President and Head of Crop Science and Sustainability Communications. She is also a member of the Crop Science Executive Leadership Team for Bayer. Jess, thank you so much for being here today.
It is wonderful, and nothing like following Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, this should be a breeze. It's going to be no problem, right? Like, amazing.
So Jess, we are going to be talking all about agriculture today. We had the pleasure of connecting at the RNC for a similar conversation. But for this crowd, I'm going to just set the scene briefly, and then we'll dive in. But as we're thinking about food production, we know that that process, it's becoming more difficult, it's expensive, it's leading to higher prices for consumers. Something we're going to unpack is the impact on farmers, rising costs, fertilizer shortages, severe weather, climate, so many different challenges to tackle in this space. And against that backdrop, I would just love for you to share first a bit more about Bayer, the work that you're doing in this space. There's an incredible body of work that you're focused on with the future of agriculture, regenerative agriculture. Tell us about Bayer's work in that space, but also tell us more about what you are hearing in your work and from the farmers on the ground and the impacts that this is having.
Yeah. First of all, Bayer is a company. We have 3 divisions. So we have a consumer health, so the Bayer aspirin. A lot of people know aspirin, vitamins, nutrients. We have a pharmaceuticals division that works on everything from oncology to Parkinson's research, which as somebody that just recently lost her father to early onset Parkinson's, I'm super hopeful that we're going to find a cure soon. And I work for crop science. So the crop science division, what we're really focused on is helping farmers produce more while restoring the planet. And how we're going to do that is by scaling regenerative ag. So we're a global company, and scale is really going to be important to combat some of the climate issues that we know are upon us. So our farmers are amazing, amazing people. And if you've never, I always say this everywhere I go, if you have not visited a farm, you should. It's pretty incredible, right? So we're in Illinois right now. We have lots of farmers here, but there's farmers that grow everything from tomatoes to corn to soybean to wheat to rice to it's an incredible community. Farmers are very tech savvy. They are some of the best environmentalists ever. Many of them will tell you that because they have to live off the land. It's very important to them. But challenges, as you're saying, Heidi, first of all, really, it's about their return on investment. They have to have financial stability. And that's extremely difficult when you're thinking about global markets. You have commodity price fluctuations that are sometimes, out of our control, sometimes in, but maybe it's a political unrest. Think about the wars of late, unfortunately. Weather events, tornadoes, hurricanes. In the Midwest a few years ago, we had derecho winds that flattened a ton of crops. So they have all this stuff happening. There's increased weeds, insect, disease pressure. So that's why innovation's so important to them. But you think about weeds and you're like, okay, like a dandelion, I'm just gonna go pull that up. No, these are like massive weeds, like feet and feet tall, root systems like a tree that produce millions of seeds every season, right? So it's super challenging for farmers. So, they don't know if it's gonna be too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. And then, one of their other big concerns is really about passing on the farm. And so as we think about needing to really attract young, diverse talent into agriculture, that's weighing heavy on our farmers' minds right now. They want farming to be here in the future. They're very proud of the lifestyle of farming, but they also want to have security for their children, if their children are going to take it over. So I had the pleasure of being in Brazil recently and met with the Vick family, and really cool family. And the 2 daughters are taking over the farm that their mother was born on, and really trying some different practices there as far as regenerative agriculture. So it's really good to see more women, more people of color in this industry. I mean, we're really creating a more diverse market, which is super, super critical. But having a return on investment at the end of the day has to be there, or farmers can't persist, and we will have a massive problem when it comes to food security, food and nutrition security.
With everything you're saying, there's such a balance that needs to be struck between this idea of ROI and productivity, but then also, when we think about the climate and we think about sustainability for next generations, as you're talking about, one of the things you and I have connected on is that crop protection tools play a huge role in this. And we're going to talk about that more, but just lay the groundwork for us a bit as it relates to crop protection tools. What role does that play in generative agriculture? And what do you think might be hampered if we have further regulation of these products? Or how would that further regulation impact those developments?
No, it's a great question, and I'll back up and talk about the term regenerative agriculture. I get a lot of questions like, well, what do you mean by that? Regenerative ag is not a new term, and the reality is that it doesn't have one definition. And I don't want us to get hung up on definitions, because then we won't move and we won't have action. And it will take collective action across big companies like Bayer, public entities, governments, small startups. It's going to take all of us to move as quick as we need to move to combat climate change. And so when we think about regenerative ag, it's about outcomes. Every farm field is different. And so really, but the outcomes we're trying to drive is the farmer productivity and well-being, climate mitigation, think about greenhouse gases, carbon, sequestration and avoidance, water conservation and quality, and soil health just underpins it all, right? So modern innovation and innovation in ag is really critical to drive those things, including crop protection. And I know that can be a controversial thing sometimes, right? People are like, well, I don't know, how is crop protection helping? But to give you an example, if you think about herbicides and seeds that have traits that enable the spraying of herbicides, that actually allows a farmer not to have to till to get rid of weeds. And so no-till is a big driver of slowing down carbon emissions in agriculture. You think about tools, pesticides, and again, partnered with the seeds and the traits that actually enable you to target certain insects at the right time. And without crop protection tools, a farmer's productivity would be at risk of over 80% loss. Even with crop protection tools, a farmer can lose up to 40% yields because of insects and weeds and diseases. So this is a big challenge, and it's one of the main things. I was meeting with Harold, he's the president of the National Corn Growers Association here in the US, and he's also a farmer in southern Minnesota. And he said, we've got to have more tools in the toolbox. We need access to more pesticides that are safe, effective, and at a good price. He always has to ask for a good price, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really key, is having choice. No matter what kind of farmer you are, I think they need a suite of choices to combat all these challenges.
I want to go deeper on the ROI piece that you were talking about. As we think about balancing, the right incentives, the right financial incentives, you and I have talked a lot about the fact that you can be climate smart, and it can also still be economically smart.
Yep.
And so when we think about what stakeholders, policymakers, industry leaders can do, what do you think are some of the areas where there can be some common ground? What are the incentives, new technologies that could actually help propel this at scale?
Yeah. And it's, when you think about policymakers, I think it's common sense, fit for purpose regulations and policies. And they need to be predictable and consistent. So we're a heavily regulated industry, as we should be. It needs to be transparent. It needs to have good science behind products to get registered. It can take, 12 years or more to get a new crop protection product to the market, from discovery to market. So we really need to have consistency there. And we need to make sure that if a regulatory body approves a product, that that it can't be counteracted by the litigation industry or others when it's not science-based, when there's not a real purposeful cause for those lawsuits. And so, not saying that people shouldn't have their day in court, because that's one of the good things about living in America, is that we can have our day in court if we need to. But it's really important to have fact-based science regulation. So that, to me, is absolutely critical from a policymaker standpoint. We need that consistency. And that does not matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. This is not a political stance, not at all. This is a human need. We need to produce more food with less. That's pure and simple. So we have, we're trying to enable our farmers to produce 50% more feed, fuel, and fiber by 2050, because that's what the FAO says we're going to need due to population growth. So we need to do that in the smartest way possible. Scale is going to be important. So, we have innovations all over the world, and it is a global market. So if you think about corn, we're sitting in the Midwest, so we have a new corn system that we're rolling out that it's pretty exciting, Pression Smart Corn. It's short corn. And everybody is always like, what do you mean by short corn? So again, if you go in a cornfield, it's 10, 12 feet high stalks. This corn is about 7 feet. That means you can plant more per acre. You can have access season long, so you can actually be prescriptive with fertilizers and or insecticides and other pesticides. And the root system is such that it stands up to those strong winds and some of the storms and climatic changes. So if you have that with a cover crop that actually can kind of hold the soil in place, we've invested in some cover crop technology. It's actually a cash oil seed that actually acts as a cover crop called covercress. That can be used for sustainable aviation fuel. So a farmer can get revenue for the harvested part, keep this root structure in place, and then you rotate it with soybeans, right? So if you think about systems that are good for the soil and the planet, they have to be profitable. It is not one or the other. It cannot be, because then farmers will not adopt it and we won't go to scale.
One of the pieces that you mentioned, you alluded to this earlier, and we've talked about that it can take 12 years from commercialization, concept to commercialization. It can cost up to $325 million. Help put into context, why is that process so cumbersome? I think, as we've discussed, that process is at risk of getting even more complicated than it already is. So why is that current process so complicated, and what do you think could better promote faster innovation in that space?
Yeah, so the process is complicated because, it should be, right? You need to make sure that the products are efficacious, they're doing what you're going to claim they're going to do for our farmers at the end of the day, but you also have to make sure they're safe. We do a battery of studies, and some that are required, and we go above and beyond even by our own standards as a company. And so when you're going through those studies, that's human health, that's environmental health, non-target organisms. I mean, it's a whole suite of studies that takes years and years. And then those studies have to go to the regulatory agencies. So you have to get them approved at the EPA to sell in this country. And then once it's at the EPA, then you have to go to each and every state you want to sell. So then the state has their own process too. So it takes quite a while to get through the gamut of studies. The other thing we're really working on, and it's super cool, is just how we discover differently. So, AI is a big topic everywhere. We have an R&D engine that's incredible, and it's really what sets us apart to really churn this funnel of innovation at the speed we need to combat some of the challenges we have. So how do you discover crop protection differently? Well, you can have an AI model that you can actually design models to fit perfectly for one target. So it really should help with the safety aspects, and actually you could target sustainability areas too. So that you want to stay away from the ones you don't want to hurt, and you want to help in areas that maybe we wouldn't have been able to discover in before. So we're also investing over $2 billion a year in our R&D engine. So it's an impressive space.
So Jess, as we're winding down today, I want to understand from your perspective, you have such a unique outlook and experience with these farmers on the ground. You've seen that human side of this. As you take that back to policymakers, what do you need from them? What do you need them to understand about this, and how can they help better meet those demands for what we know is an incredibly evolving climate and population.
Yeah, I mean, I would be remiss if I did not say, please progress the Farm Bill, right? I mean, that's a very obvious one that our farmers really need that predictability so they can start planning for 2025 season. And then again, that predictable, rigorous but predictable and consistent process so that no matter if you're a Bayer crop science at the beginning of the chain or you're a consumer at the end of the chain, you know what to expect from the food and produce that you're buying. So it's really, really critical if we're going to, again, produce enough while restoring the planet and really, scaling this more worldwide for access.
You used the word fit for purpose policy earlier, so I think that's the perfect note to end on today, Jess.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Jess, for joining us. Thank you to Bayer for their partnership, and enjoy the rest of the day.